issue of digital services tax, which of course is something that the UK has been pushing very hard. But we were very clear, Mark, that this was not within the remit of the recent trade deal between the United States and the UK.
Yeah, that's my understanding, Mike, is that first of all, the trade deal between the US and the UK announced around May 8th is not as complete as they're making it sound. There's a ways to go on that. And so this is, in a way, a follow-up to an earlier report I did on that trade deal. At any rate, we'll move on and kind of explain the main facts surrounding the digital services tax. And for one thing, we've got the White House trade advisor, Peter Navarro. He has had this to say: digital taxes has spread like a bad virus around the world, but it started in Europe and it basically targets American companies. And I know that the Trump administration, as Politico reported, is still pressuring the UK to lift its tax on digital services, calling it, again, a bad virus. And as Navarro also stated, as we're showing here, we're still in negotiations. And the president and other top White House officials acknowledged during remarks on the race deal in the Oval Office that the trade deal in the Oval Office, that many contentious details have yet to be ironed out. So again, as I'm saying, there's a long ways to go on this. We'll move on from there. As of the 1st of April 2020, this is a little bit of history, the UK government introduced a new 2% tax on the revenues of search engines, social media services, and online marketplaces, which derive value from UK users. Under the current international tax framework, the value businesses derive from user participation is not taken into account. That is, the business profits between different countries. But this measure will ensure that large multinational businesses support vital public services fairly. So going back to 2020, that's the rationale they're saying, the UK government, for the digital services tax. A policy paper from the UK government also said the following. You might want to show this one. The most sustainable long-term solution to the tax challenges arising from digitalization is reform of the international corporate tax rules. That's what the UK government's now talking about 5 years later. The UK strongly supports G7, G20, and OECD discussions on long-term reform. And you guys might want to comment on this, but there's also a Bilderberg connection that you might recall, Mike, when I was there in 2013 covering Bilderberg and Watford. This came up because Googleberg, another type of meeting, also took place in Watford right before Bilderberg that year. And there were some high-tech talks where tax matters kind of leaked out of that. And at any rate, just before that 2013 Bilderberg meeting, the 6th through 9th of June, Google's then executive Eric Schmidt, as we might recall, he was in the UK discussing Google's tax practices. He and the other big tech leaders held that Googleberg gathering in Watford. There was a tax avoidance controversy. At the time, Google and other multinational companies faced scrutiny over their UK tax arrangements. Google paid £6 million in UK corporation tax, we're told, but that still drew some criticism. Schmidt defended Google's tax practices, asserting that the company was adhering to the law and fulfilling its fiduciary responsibilities to its shareholders. And then Eric Schmidt said that if the UK wanted more tax revenue, it should amend its tax laws. And right before Bilderberg, Schmidt also met with British PM David Cameron at the time. So that's the basic facts of it, guys. But I know, Mike, you've had some long-term concerns, as have I, as to whether that tax would actually be levied against those multinationals or just written off, and that there'd be a lot of shenanigans going on and things like that. Maybe you guys want to comment on it as well, especially you, Mike. I know you were watching this issue very closely.
Well, actually, we both were at the time, and this has been a long. This is a bit like European Defence Union. It's one of those policies that there's massive pushback against, even though the certain elements of the elite want to see it pushed through as quickly as possible. And this idea of internationalizing the corporation tax regime has been one that's been talked about, as you say, Mark, for 15 years now. It's ridiculous. But I think for me, one of the key points about corporation tax is that it is actually in a sense, a stealth tax on us as individuals, because there's no corporation. The corporations are there to provide shareholder value, and they are not going to reduce their profit-making capability by paying corporation tax out of profits. They'll simply put their prices up, particularly in this sort of cartelized economies that we increasingly have. So they'll stick their prices up for everything in order to cover the cost of increased corporation taxes. But Google, of course, even at that time, was telling fibs, shall we say, because they're based in Ireland. They're not based in the UK, because Ireland has a much much softer corporation tax regime than the UK does. Now, what's different about this particular tax is that they're attempting, first of all, they're not attempting to tax profits. They're just saying 2% of any money that we perceive that you make from UK users has got to be paid. So we'll see how that pans out. I think, as you said, Mark, the key point here, though, is that despite the UK government's UK government's claims that this was excluded from the US-UK trade deal, that's absolutely still a matter of negotiation, is clearly the case.
Yeah, they're not going to be making much progress on this, because the issues are fundamental. Tax on corporate profits,
right?
Not on turnover, not on sales. The government's doing sales tax and VAT and things like that, and all they're doing is these companies are reinvesting back into grow their operations, bigger office buildings, bigger brand presence,
right,
to help their sort of image and things like that. But it's funny, Mike, a lot of this stuff was taken care of with TPP and TTIP, but of course that didn't make it past the post. So again, we're back to, for different reasons, by the way, but
yes,
it was still part of that package. And so we're back now teasing out pieces of those all-encompassing international, transnational corporate deals.
Right.
From before. But the 2% is interesting, because that brings it right along normalization with the WTO standards. Again, but who's going to pay and who's going to bear the cost? Well, we're going to bear the cost.
We are, absolutely.
And the government might charge a sales tax, the corporations might pay a little more, but we're going to end up footing the bill, aren't we?
We are, yes.
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, there's not only the cost push inflation thing where that cost will be passed on to us, but now I'm recalling, Mike, that I think you were also concerned, as was I, back when Bilderberg was happening, that by making an international tax entity, if you will, they'll create a whole nother tax authority that then would have a much longer reach than individual national tax authorities. I think that was the other concern, if I'm not mistaken, back in 2013. Just who and what would be this international tax authority? What kind of reach would they have beyond corporations to individuals and smaller companies? Would they suppress smaller companies in favor of the bigger companies having even more monopoly power? That would be another, at least general concern to look at. And I think we thought about it back then.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, a global slush fund is the big fear in the background. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Right, we're just going to move on to the ad break in a second, but just before we do that, Kenny, can I just ask you to fix the studio clock for us, because we're going to be a bit lost in a second if you don't. But anyway, thanks, Mark, for that. Okay, if you like what the UK column does and you'd like to support us, please do so. The website is support.ukcolumn.org. You could make a donation. You can join us as a member, and if you do join us as a member, you will get access to UK Column News Extra, which follows each live news program. Pick something up from the UK Column shop, or if you buy something from clive2carl.com using the link here, we do get a small percentage of those deals. So thank you very much for anybody that does that. If you can't do that, that's absolutely fine, but please do share, at the very least, everything that you find on the UK Column website. Please do share it from the UK Column website if you can. Now, tomorrow, tonight at 7 p.m, Germ Warfare will be speaking to Tom Cohen.